The leather on my old brown recliner is worn down smooth on the armrests from where I grip it every time I stand up. For a long time, that was just an unconscious habit, something I did without thinking twice. But one Tuesday afternoon, about 3 years ago, I gripped those armrests, pushed down hard with my shoulders, commanded my legs to lift my weight, and absolutely nothing happened. My knees shook. My thighs felt like they were packed with wet sand. I sank right back into the cushion with a heavy thud. Linda was in the kitchen running the faucet, completely unaware that her husband was temporarily trapped in his own living room. I sat there staring at my work boots, realizing that 30 years of hauling freight and climbing ladders in a Knoxville warehouse had not bought me a lifetime pass to a strong body. The strength I had taken for granted was quietly packing its bags and moving out. I always thought I knew exactly how a man was supposed to stay strong as he put years behind him. You eat meat. You eat a solid piece of beef, you eat pork chops, you get your protein, and that protein automatically turns into muscle. That was the unbreakable law of the working man. But my daughter Megan, who works as an occupational therapist, sees guys like me all day long. She sees men who spent their lives working with their hands slowly shrinking inside their own flannel shirts. She sat me down at the kitchen table a few days after my incident with the chair and explained something that felt like a punch to the gut. She told me that after a certain age, your body just stops listening to the meat. You can eat a massive steak, feel completely stuffed, and your muscles will simply not receive the signal to rebuild. The door is locked. She brought over a nutritional study she had been reading at her clinic. It tracked older men and showed that as we age, our stomach acids get weaker. Our digestion slows to a crawl, and the heavy protein we eat just passes right through the system without ever reaching the legs that desperately need it to stand up from a chair. The researchers called it a resistance in the muscle, a stubbornness that happens when the body gets older. I just called it a terrifying waste of time. I realized right then that forcing down more ground beef was not going to save my independence. I needed food that did not require my aging body to work so hard just to pull the fuel out of it. I needed efficiency. I spent the next several months paying very close attention to what folks ate before we had drive-thrus and plastic tubs of protein powder. I found 5 specific things. 5 old ways of eating that actually bypass the stubbornness of an aging digestive system. I am going to walk you through every single one of them today, exactly how I came to understand them. I want you to pay very close attention to the last one I mentioned, because that specific food, the one that sits in a glass jar in my pantry right now, is the reason I can still walk up my front porch steps carrying my youngest grandson without thinking twice about my knees buckling. I am not a nutritionist. I am not a doctor standing in a white coat explaining biology on a whiteboard. I am just a man who felt his own strength slipping away, got terrified of becoming a burden to his wife, and decided to figure out a different way forward. I have seen too many good men from the warehouse retire, sit down in a comfortable chair, and simply never get back up. The first real change happened when I started looking at how to make my stomach's job easier. If my digestion was slowing down and struggling with heavy meats, I needed something that was already partially broken down before it even hit my mouth. Megan mentioned fermented foods. Now, growing up in East Tennessee, we did not exactly have fermented soybean paste sitting on the dinner table. They call it miso. I thought it was just a salty soup you get at a restaurant, but the actual science behind it stopped me in my tracks. I read a report detailing how elderly folks in certain parts of Japan had remarkably low rates of muscle wasting and bone loss. The reason was that the fermentation process takes the tough plant protein and completely dismantles it. Your tired stomach does not have to fight the food. It just absorbs the nutrients. I have a neighbor named Tom who lives 2 doors down. Tom had gotten to the point where a regular dinner just sat in his gut like a lead weight, so he had slowly stopped eating much of anything. He started looking hollowed out around the collarbone. I told him about stirring this fermented paste into a warm broth. He started having a mug of it right before his evening meal. Within a month, the color came back to his cheeks. He told me his stomach finally felt awake again. You never boil it, you just stir it into warm water so you keep the good bacteria alive. It primes the pump for everything else you are going to eat that day. The second thing I had to relearn was something my own grandmother knew instinctively, but we somehow let slip away in modern times. I am talking about real bone broth, not the salty colored water they sell in cardboard boxes at the supermarket. I mean taking marrow bones and joint bones and simmering them on a low fire for an entire day and night. When you hit your late 60s and 70s, your joints start feeling like unoiled door hinges. That is because the connective tissue is literally drying up. My doctor handed me a paper from a medical school back east that analyzed what happens when you slow cook bones for 24 hours. The slow heat pulls the deep collagen and the natural lubricants right out of the marrow. And because it is in a warm liquid form, your body drinks it straight into the system without fighting through digestive barriers. My son Derek runs an HVAC business in town. He has a retired pipe fitter working for him part-time who absolutely swore by this old method. The guy is 72 and still crawling under houses with heavy tool belts. He told Derek he boils beef bones every single weekend and drinks a warm cup every morning before he starts his truck. I started doing it myself. When that homemade broth cools in the refrigerator, it turns into a thick, jiggly jelly. That jelly is the exact material your knees and shoulders are begging for. I drink a warm cup on an empty stomach now, and the grinding noise in my right shoulder is barely a whisper compared to what it was. That brings me to the third change, and it involves how we handle our vegetables. For a while, when I was trying to get my health back on track, I was eating giant raw salads. I was chewing through bowls of dry spinach like a rabbit, thinking I was doing my body a massive favor. But an aging stomach cannot break down the tough cellulose walls of raw plant leaves. You chew it, you swallow it, and you get almost zero actual vitamins out of it. It is a frustrating waste of effort. I came across a study showing that if you take those dark leafy greens, things like collards, spinach, and mustard greens, and you gently cook them down in a pan with a good spoonful of fat like olive oil, the entire game changes. The heat breaks the plant walls open. The fat grabs onto the vitamins so your body can actually carry them into your bloodstream. The absorption rate jumps by something like 400%. Linda's older sister was struggling with her blood pressure and feeling physically weak all the time. She was eating dry raw salads for lunch and getting absolutely nowhere. We finally convinced her to start wilting her greens in a pan with a little garlic and olive oil. Not cooking them down to a gray mush, just enough to soften them up and make them bright. The natural compounds in those cooked greens opened up her blood vessels. She sat on our porch a few weeks later and told me she finally felt like she had oxygen flowing all the way down to her feet again. I make sure to eat a pan of cooked greens with my dinner almost every night now. The fourth piece of the puzzle is not glamorous at all. In fact, a lot of folks turn their nose up at it immediately. But if you want to keep the muscle attached to your frame, you cannot ignore small fish with the bones left in. I am talking about sardines. I used to think they were just bait you take on a fishing trip. But the biggest unseen problem we face as we get older is internal inflammation. It is like a slow-burning fire inside your body, and that fire uses your own muscle tissue as firewood. I saw a university study looking at older folks who ate small, oily fish a few times a week. The fish oil puts out the fire, and the highly digestible protein rebuilds the tissue. But the real secret is the soft bones. You eat them right out of the tin. The calcium in those tiny bones is recognized by your body instantly, unlike those thick, chalky calcium pills that just sit at the bottom of your stomach, causing grief. There is an older gentleman at the local hardware store named Arthur. He keeps a tin of sardines in the glove box of his truck. He told me one afternoon it was the only thing that kept his knuckles from locking up when the Tennessee weather turned damp and cold. I started mashing them up on a piece of toasted bread with a squeeze of lemon juice. You get the oil, you get the protein, and you get the bone calcium all at the exact same time. The stiffness I used to feel in my hands when I woke up cut down by half just from making that one adjustment to my week. And that leaves the one thing I told you I rely on the most. The single biggest dietary change I made after that humiliating day I could not get out of my recliner. We all know meat digests fast. It hits your system, spikes your protein levels, and then it is gone. But an older body simply cannot handle a massive sudden spike. It wastes it. What your aging muscles actually need is a slow, steady drip of fuel all day long. I started reading about those isolated regions in the world where people regularly live past 90 without ever needing a cane or a walker. They do not eat massive steaks. They eat beans. They eat lentils. They eat legumes. They soak them and slow cook them until they are perfectly soft. A massive longevity study tracked elderly folks for 7 straight years and found that a simple daily bowl of legumes was the #1 dietary factor tied to a longer, stronger life. The protein in a lentil is locked securely inside a special kind of fiber. When you eat it, your body takes hours to break it down. That means your legs are getting a steady, uninterrupted supply of building blocks from noon all the way until dinner. I take a bag of dry lentils, I soak them overnight in a bowl of water to get the harsh compounds out, and I cook them slow with some onions and a splash of that bone broth until they are almost like a cream. That soft fiber feeds the good bacteria in the gut, and the slow protein feeds my legs. My energy does not suddenly crash at 3 in the afternoon anymore. I do not feel that terrifying hollow weakness behind my knees when I stand up from a chair. When you feel your body slipping away from you, it is incredibly easy to panic. It is easy to think you need to go buy $100 worth of fancy powders or force down steaks that your stomach can no longer handle. You don't. You just need to work with the body you actually have right now. It is older, it is a little more stubborn, and it needs its fuel broken down and delivered properly. I did not change my whole life in one single afternoon. I just started boiling some bones on a Sunday. Then I started cooking my greens in a little oil. Then I bought a cheap bag of lentils. That is exactly how you buy your independence back. Step by step, meal by meal. I am going to go check the oil level in Linda's car now, but I am always around. Take care of your legs and they will take care of you.